I had an opportunity to visit with our bishop this week to talk about this stuff, and he threw the term out, prepper, and it's not always in a positive light, but as those who have been CERT trained, how many have ever been called to duty and actually performed the things that you were CERT trained to do?
Nope. I have one time.
Okay, so here's my point. Sometimes it's important for us to learn things just in case. The subtitle here is an exercise in what if, not unsimilar to CERT, military, medical, or Boy Scout training. Those of us who were in the scouting program when it still functioned and existed, we learned lots of stuff. First aid and how to make a fire, without matches and all kinds of things. And so our gist of what we're going to be doing tonight is kind of talking in the vein of what if. Are we saying that this is going to happen? Are we saying that these are things that we're going to be implementing anytime soon? And the answer to that, like any first aid emergency, I hope not. And that's kind of where we want to go. And so Corey put together this scenario, and I'm just going to read it along with you. Scenario: a devastating earthquake has happened up north, and people are fleeing because they no longer have a place to live. You learn that at least 1,000 individuals are coming to your city with the hope of a sanctuary for an indefinite amount of time. They're coming by cars, trucks, and however they can get here, with only the most valuable things, perhaps some food. Some will be able to help with finances. You are not aware of what things they are bringing. It is the middle of winter. You can only imagine that there will be children of any age, older people, and possibly pets. Everything in San Pete with utilities is currently working. That would be nice. San Pete stores are still open, but anticipate there will be a run-on supply. Get there within the first half hour, and maybe you'll get something. A meeting has been called for all family heads of your city to meet at the cultural hall of the church. And so I did a little Google search, and I asked, how many people in the United States have been displaced in the last 5 years? And you see the stats here, a lot more than I thought. The approximate total, 2.4 million people in the last 5 years have been displaced, or at least temporary homeless. If you've heard any of the stories of the people who have been displaced because of the fires in LA, it's caused some interesting situations for people. And so our discussion tonight is going to be, what if people come and what do we do? And so we want to talk about how things are handled. In 2018, we lived in Woodland Hills, and there was a fire, if you remember that. And those who were in Woodland Hills and Elk Ridge, we were evacuated. We didn't know for how long. We were in the middle of canning peaches. It was on a September 13th, I think was the date. And 10 days later, when we finally came home, there were rotten peaches still, in process. We literally grabbed what we needed to and left. It was interesting in our situation there. We would meet at Salem Hills High School, and we would get updates from our church leaders who were pretty much running the show, the stake presidents, and the city leaders were standing with them as support. And of course, Red Cross was there. Red Cross stood up at the very beginning and said, okay, who needs shelter? We've got some places for you to stay. We've got the school here. We've got, nobody raised their hand. They repeated it 3 times. Who doesn't have a place to stay? Everyone was like, no, we're good. We got places. The point is that the people took care of each other. After 2 days, in disgust, Red Cross left because they said there's nothing here for us to do. you guys are taking care of it. We are a community of people who help and look out for each other. Another story. I've got a patient who lives in Switzerland, and she splits her time between Switzerland and Heber, and in talking to her about the refugee situation in Switzerland, and you're thinking, well, what refugee situation? It's the Ukraine situation, and so their church leaders had implored or asked members of their congregations, can you take somebody in? Can you help with this refugee situation? And many rose to the invitation, and very many of them soon regretted it, and they were sharing complaints of these people won't do anything. They sit around, they complain about the food, they complain about how junky your house is, and things were so much nicer in Ukraine, and it created quite a bit of discord. And so with that in mind, myself and several others, we started putting a list. What if that happens to us? First thing you may need to understand is if there's a general evacuation that happens where people are directed to outside communities, us being one of them, chances are your house may already be housing family and friends, right? Those are the logical people. One of the concerns is, do you invite strangers into your house? You've heard the story about the camel and the tent in the sandstorm, and the issue is do you need to set some ground rules? Do you need to have some precautions? And so let's jump into this handout here. And one of the things that we thought, and feel to jump in with any of your ideas and thoughts, is most people in our communities are going to be looking to their church leaders. They just are. And so I spoke with Bishop Johansson. Corey spoke with Bishop Clark, and again, my intent with visiting with the bishop was kind of a heads up. Have you thought about this? Not asking, what are you going to do, but making them aware that, you're going to be in charge. And again, the idea being, what do we do? How do we handle the situation? In this type of scenario, most will turn to church leaders for guidance and direction. It's important that local residents are protected from potential problems and issues that may arise from a mass influx of people who have been displaced from their homes and lifestyle. We feel that with proper organization and direction, refugees can be better served and local residents can operate within safe parameters, minimizing stress and discord during stressful events. When people are displaced, there's a lot of stress, and depending on the nature, if we look at Ukraine, a lot of distress, a lot of death, a lot of destruction, and in their case, many do not have a place to return home to, and so we put together a list. All refugees should be evaluated or processed, and some of these words are maybe not real friendly, but they describe what may need to happen. All refugees should be evaluated or processed at local church or city center and set up for temporary shelter. One of the things that I've thought, and share what you think, is if somebody comes onto your property or knocks at your door and said, hey, we need shelter. You've heard what's happened. We're in desperate straits. What do you do?
Check in with the upstairs.
and that's my feeling
What
is,
was the answer?
Well, send them up to the main
Sure.
center.
send them up to the check-in place, right? And I think that, to me, is a safe response, you know, and the reason that you would want someone to check in, it's like, you know, if you've got loved ones and they're trying to find you, there would be nice that there was a local roster that says, oh, you know, the Jones family, they're over here, and these people are there. Let me share a quick story. I have pioneer ancestors, and I had a great grandmother who, maybe it's 3 greats, but anyways, who came across the plains with one of the wagon trains, and her fiance left the season before her with the intent, I'm gonna set everything up for us, you know, and you'll come, we'll be married, we'll be sealed, and you know, everything's gonna be ready and waiting for you. So she comes into Salt Lake and couldn't find him. Asking around, do you know this guy? Where is he? I'm looking for him, and you know, shares her story, and nobody knew. And I don't know if there was not a registry or what happened, but she couldn't find him. After 3 or 4 months, she was strongly encouraged to become the 5th wife of William Draper, of Draper City fame. She became his wife. After a few months later, guess who comes into town? Fiance comes into town to collect his bride, and she says, you know, I've been married, I've been sealed in the endowment house. Sorry. And so as a result, you know, she became the 5th wife, who, you know, had children and so forth. And so I look at that situation, I think, man, what a tragedy, you know, and, but they settled in Sanpete, and you know, here I am. And so, so one of the things that I thought, and if somebody is coming in and saying, you know, we're refugees, they won't say that, but you know, they need a place to set up. We want to know a little bit about them, right? And so the list of basically, you know, who you are there special needs, are there medical needs, are there, you know, psychological, you know, concerns, you know, what do you have, you know, do you have clothing, do you have, you know, any resources, financial situation, pet situation, that could be a tricky one. I've got a patient who just quit her job because the place where she worked would no longer let her bring the service animal. And she had a little dog. She was a dog groomer, and anyway, she quit her job because that dog meant more than anything. And so, you know, pet situations, skills or experience, work history, military, you know, background or history, a background check, if that's available. We kind of want to know who we're dealing with, please.
Does that include people that you'd consider convicts or people that are not trustworthy? Or?
We go into that, yeah. Right, wouldn't you want to know?
I would.
Oh, you're a registered sex offender. Yeah, we're going to put you with this family of 8.
Yeah, good idea.
Right? And so, well, it was so long ago and I've reformed and da-da-da-da-da-da. You know, you want to know who you're dealing with. Is there a sponsor or some sort of connection?
These are all questions for like if you're renting a house.
Oh yeah.
You know, that it's the same thing and it's fine. You get a background check, you know, on and on. So these are fine. These are legitimate questions.
Last time we talked about a list of survival group things. You know, do you have, you know, medical experience? Do you have you know, gardening experience, you know, can you cook, can you repair things, can you do, you know, what are you bringing to the table? Or do you not have skills? Do you have any concerns about us? Do we have any concerns about you, right? Anyone with the maturity knows when you go into a job interview, if you're being interviewed for a job, I am more thinking in terms of I'm interviewing the employer than them interviewing me. When you're young, it's like, oh, please hire me, I need a job. You go around the block a couple times and it's like, I don't know if I want to work with you. And so, you know, weapons, are they bringing weapons? You know, do they have training? I've got lists for 3 more. What would you add to this? What's come to mind?
I guess background check would be criminal, I think,
Yeah,
includes criminal.
Because I read ahead, I know that the rest of the handout refers to this, but there also needs to be a training situation for incomers, for the community rules, the expectations for them, explaining that they're gonna be in a probation community and so on. I realize that comes later,
yeah,
but it also belongs on this list as well,
yeah.
to be prepared to have trainers train the incoming.
So would that be considered processing or?
Processing, yeah, trained processors and, you know, the face of the public, PR people, liaisons between incoming and leadership.
You know, we talk about, a little bit later,
Intelligence.
talking about an agreement, Marcus.
When this all takes place, I don't think we're gonna have access to a background check.
I agree with you.
We're gonna have to figure that out, and we probably need people who are experienced with counseling people that can maybe pull those things out, maybe at the head, wherever we send to the church to be vetted or whatever. Hopefully they'll be able to pound some of this stuff out and find out what their background really is. Otherwise,
They're gonna try and hide it.
they're gonna hide it, yeah, they're not gonna answer your questions.
You know, that could be part of the process, you know, if you ask people, do you know of anybody that are untrustworthy or that would do this or do that, you know? And just do a standard set of questions as the people come through. You know some of these people, are they good people or bad?
Right.
Yeah.
Here's a question. Has anybody been trained in interrogation? First-hand experience. But the point is, a good interrogator can sit down with somebody, and when in a fairly short time, you know, they've got the lowdown on this person. And so again, finding people with skills. If in the event that we're all buttoned up in our homes, and let's say we've got people checking in at the community center here or at one of the churches, are you going to be able to break away from your home to volunteer, you know, time? Or are you going to say, no, just leave us alone, we're tight and good where we are? Because it's going to require some manpower to help with you know, that situation that may arise.
There may be additional concerns about protecting your home while you are away. You know, mom and dad wanna go volunteer down at the church, but they can't leave their 5 kids if there's 20,000 extra people in the valley, or 2 million, or 200,000.
Right.
So,
And so there's a lot to consider. When things fall apart, where do the policemen and a lot of these people go? They go to take care, make sure their families are in safe care.
So the basis of this is a long term, not a short term, because a lot of this stuff could be altered according to the amount of time that you're looking at supporting
Right.
an unknown amount of time. Or
And so that's kind of the premise, is an unknown amount of time.
Okay.
If it's, let's say it's gonna be, we know that the storm or whatever is gonna pass within, 3 or 4 days. Do we, roll out the mats in the schools and in the churches and things like that, versus, something that, there's devastated homes are destroyed.
Several years ago, my husband and I were coming down the 6 and then 89, and we saw a couple of bicyclists. They were girls, 20-ish, and walking their bikes down the 6. And we talked about it as we drove past and decided to go back and check them out. They had sleeping bags and stuff like that. They were touring from Germany and seemed nice, and we had a space for them, and we invited them to come to our home and stay there. They ended up staying for several weeks. And when it came to the point where I had to leave for a day, and I didn't want them home alone with my husband, and they said, oh, you know, that they didn't, they either didn't care or they didn't acknowledge my concern, but it was like, no, you have to leave now. I'm leaving, and I didn't want my husband to be confronted with any accusations. That was my concern.
Right.
And so it ended up, it was just kind of an awkward situation getting them to actually leave. So, in great conditions. I mean, there was no catastrophe or any big problems. It's just one of those little experiences that you're like, maybe I won't do that again.
So would that have been, if we had thought ahead, maybe a list of things that you do and don't, and you have to sign it, I don't know. Already, a list, in other words.
Having a clear end date would have been fine, but here's another thing that we're not talking about. Is what if somebody tries to take over and is violent and wants all the resources for themselves or their group of men who are big and
well trained.
controlling and controlling that, and we need to have that conversation.
We do. Have you watched the Homestead movie? Any of you watched the first 2 episodes of the series?
How do we watch it? 'Cause
It's on Angel.
Oh, it is, okay.
Angel on
Studios.
Angel Studios, is that what it's
Don't
called?
ruin it for us. I haven't seen it.
I haven't seen
Okay,
it
I won't.
either.
I won't say anymore.
I was just gonna say, every question comes up in the handouts. It's really cool. This is an amazing handout. Did you do it, Corey, or with Brother Christensen? Amazing handout,
Not
but
in this orange one, but
yes,
in the next. Oh, in
the
this
orange one is
And
great.
so-
It
so
discusses
our
all
point
of that and all
is
of that.
we need to have
It's a
clear
good handout.
expectations. And those need to be shared. One of the things that, well, let's go through some of these expected rules of conduct and responsibilities.
Before you move on, there's one
Please.
thing I think we should add, and that, there needs to be some kind of work schedule to put these people together, to work, whatever the work is, whatever the city or the church needs. There's a couple of things it does for you. It puts them in a situation where, they have to go out and do certain things to receive benefits, you know? They're probably gonna want food, water, shelter, whatever. But if they have to work, you can control them to a certain extent, cause you know where they're at.
Yeah.
And there's gonna be some that will not work, like was mentioned earlier. And I think we ought to add that on.
And that needs to be, again, clear expectations. However, if you've got people who are coming in a very distressed state, they've lost family members perhaps, they've lost, everything, you're gonna be dealing with complicated situations. And not everybody's gonna roll up their sleeves and say, I'm just gonna work through it. And, so.
But I know in many situations, if you don't work, you don't eat.
Right. Have you seen what they're doing with the prisoners in El Salvador? if you go online and you look, you know the situation. They got a new president. The president says we're cleaning things up. El Salvador used to be one of the most dangerous countries, and now it's the safest. And they rounded up all the gangbangers and threw them in jail. And so you see these guys, and they're just in their skivvies, and they're being chained and shackled, and you know, and the point is they have taken control of things. Now, if you look at what they're doing, one of the scenes that I saw is this massive room, and all of these soldiers are sitting in front of a sewing machine, and they're sewing, and they're teaching them auto mechanics, and these guys have jobs and training, and they are busy from sun up to sundown, and they finish their training for the day, and they're whooped, they're beat, but they're learning skills. And interviewing many of them, they say, I'm so excited because I have skills going out. I'm going to be able to work as an auto mechanic. I'm going to be able to work, you know, doing whatever skills are needed. And it's a boon to the economy of the country. And so you're absolutely right. People have got to have a meaning and a purpose, and you know, and you may be, you know, the head of a financial corporation, but now you're a third-tier gardener, and you're busy, you know, working all day long. And the point is you're absolutely correct. And so here's a couple things. No individual or family should be permitted to lobby residents for moving onto their premises. Meaning, go check in at the wherever. I would say church, but here's another issue. What if somebody says, I don't want to be associated with you Mormons? You know, I'm right. Okay, so let's take that in the next step, Scott. And so somebody decides, you know, here's an open field. I look at where I live, right across the street. There's a 5-acre plot with a for sale sign, and somebody decides, this is good. We're gonna squat here. How do you deal with that as a community?
Probably, I mean, I've read enough of these post-apocalyptic novels to know what you do in almost any situation, and you're probably gonna need some kind of security around the whole town, the whole whatever the geographical unit that you
Right.
wanna control, and it's just restricted access, restricted in, you know, people coming in, and it's just so there's a lot of people doing security work, and people may think, well, that's just outrageous, but it's, you know,
It's essential.
You know, these are outrageous times, so it needs to be outrageous.
Yeah. I talk here, residents should not be required to accept any non-family refugee onto their property without first being matriculated. We talked about that. We want to match people appropriately. If you know, the Christiansons say, you know, we've got room and space and tents for 3 families, and you know, they want to make sure that they're going to be, you know, a decent fit, or at least appear to be. Incomers should be required to settle in designated city or church areas and become established there to prove themselves before being considered to graduate into a residential property, and then only after application, interview, and invitation, right? And so, again, one of my thoughts here is agency. You know, we want, what I tell people with the, you know, the medical system, especially when COVID was an issue, is we want informed consent. I gotta know the truth, and, you know, let us decide from there. And rules of conduct, expectation, and limitations must be formalized in a signed agreement by all parties involved. Consequences of infraction should be carried out by city or church designees rather than property owners. And so in the situation with the 2 German cyclists, if we were in this type of a situation, she would go to the next up and say, you know, it's time for these girls to leave. And someone would you'd walk in here, you know, we would get, you know, Max and
Yeah.
Rick, and they'd say, it's time to leave. And they would say, okay. But the point is,
They did leave, I just had to be
firm,
very firm.
yeah. And so the point is though, is, like you said earlier, what if somebody's, you know, intent is, this is a nice place, we should be here, you know, rather than you.
We deserve this.
Yeah. Infractions of an individual within a family will bear consequences for the entire family. If a refugee family has a child, adult, or youth who is not complying with established rules or agreements, the entire family will bear the burden. This may help parents be diligent stewards over those in their charge. What do you think about that?
Yeah,
Has to be.
That's the way it ought to be now.
Has to be.
yeah. What's new?
Kyle, there is an organization called the Grameen Bank. So it's where
The grooming?
Grameen,
Grameen, okay,
and it's in Bangladesh.
okay.
So it's a, people are in poverty and they're trying to get out of poverty and to help each other and all that. So they get a loan. One person gets a loan in there's a principle here that carries over, okay? One person gets the loan and everybody in that small group, like 10, usually women,
Always women.
work together to accomplish that first person's goal. Once they've met that goal, then the second person gets a loan.
And they're called microloans.
Yes,
Right,
and the
they're-
first one is
they're-
paid off, and so, but everybody, the whole group is affected. So if the one person doesn't pay back the loan, nobody else in that group gets a loan.
Oh,
And so that's part of the same thing, with the whole family bearing the responsibility for it. If we, just knowing that principle, that you put, more than just one person is responsible for themselves, other people are responsible too, so they hold them accountable. It's a very powerful mechanism.
because we know that peer pressure works.
Yes,
Positive peer pressure as well as negative peer pressure.
yes.
A pattern in my family, 2 generations ago, my grandparents came out and settled fruit farms along the Columbia River Gorge in Oregon. And so in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, they had migrant families come and work the fruit farms during the fruit season. And so each migrant family got, you know, basically a bungalow or chicken coop type living situation, right? But those same rules applied if any of the kids or the parents did anything that was not in the contract that my great-grandparents had set, then they were out. They were out, even if it meant that the fruit wasn't all picked at the time. So there's a pattern.
So it sounds tried and tested.
Yeah.
Yeah. If for any reason it is deemed that an incoming family or individual is not a good fit, where they're at, a council will determine relocation, ideally from private residence back to the church or city general location, or expulsion. Yeah, and so here's I didn't copy for you, but I've got a whole list. I used AI and I said, what are some of the rules and guidelines in refugee camps? And it just had a whole lot of things, you know, this is, you know, these are the infractions and these are the problems and this is how they're settled and so forth. And so the point is we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to be aware of all of the spokes.
And we need to find out while we still have the internet, so we can ask.
Right.
We need to, before then, maybe go prepared.
Right, before we need it.
Diane.
So I was thinking, when people are expelled or people are removed, whether voluntary or involuntary, there's gonna be people who wanna retaliate. So I don't know if it's in here, but we're gonna have to have some kind of security or, something set up where we can secure safety for the community.
Right.
If people are wanting to come back in and do harm to maybe a family who they were living with, who made them leave, or
Yeah, retribution, right?
yeah, so,
I mean,
yeah,
And again, when you're in situations, and sometimes life and death situations, you need protection,
Did you say debt or death?
Life or
Death.
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 death, yeah. You know, in a survival situation, and those that have read, some of these, survival type knowledge, if somebody gets kicked out of the community, that may mean death. I mean, it may mean, and so, it's interesting in our culture, when I was a kid and you all were kids, the saying was, and I grew up in Northern California, was, oh, hire a Mormon boy, they're hard workers. Does that statement still hold true?
No.
It doesn't. And so again, maybe, expectations are gonna need to be established and met, and consequences. We talked about an agreement, we talked about working things. Again, community camp setup, you need to be organized. If you look at pictures of refugee camps, one of the organized ones, you see tents all set up in a row. You see, sanitation. We talked about sanitation last time, how important that is. And again, abiding by some of these essential rules, sanitation, being one of them. You got a kid who's too lazy to go to the latrine, and he decides he's just gonna, pee outside his tent door. You need to understand that, no, that you don't do that. And
There are adults that do the same thing, so.
there are
Don't
adults that
just
do the
label
same
the
thing.
kids.
Yeah. A lot of the main camp needs and limitations we talked about last time. One of my questions, for the church or the city is, do you have, 1,000 bowls, where you could serve soup? If you look at buying paper products, boy, you'll buzz through those so quick. And so do you have, and whose responsibility is that? It's interesting in our culture here, a lot of people will say, well, I heard the church has got lots and lots of tents and they've got, all this stuff. And I think it was Elder Packer that said, don't expect the church to be providing, stuff for you if you've got the ability to do it yourself. And so, I bought, I've mentioned last time, this wheat straw dishware, and I think I bought 66 20-ounce bowls for like $30. And so, again, if somebody comes onto your premises, you say, okay, we've got room for, 2 families, total of, 10 or 12 people. What support are you gonna need from the church for that?
So are those bowls, they're washable?
They're washable, yeah. They're reusable.
What do you wash?
Well, someone was here last time, a woman that was sitting right here. She says, I've got those, and they last between 1 and 2 years, if you put them in the dishwasher. And it sounded like she was just throwing them in the dishwasher, and because they will eventually decompose after, a year or 2. What it is the wheat straw powdered and then mixed with a resin or some sort of, plastic. But they're supposed to be safe and without all the other, plastic problems. We talked a little bit about, dealing with squatters, non-compliant people or groups in unauthorized location, public or private. Are there city or county ordinances that are clear as to how to deal with these issues? Some cities basically say, no, you can't, quote, camp here. Do we have something that we can, fall back on and say, gosh, sorry, but you're breaking the rules here? Is there something in the county? You know, I'm outside of city limits, I'm in the county, and so is there something that you can do for that? Or as I say here, do we have, you know, enforcement, deputized sheriff or law enforcement, a goon squad?
Those things won't be upheld during an influx of tens of thousands of people.
You're right. How do you deal with theft, violence, health threats, improper sanitation, contagions? Do we need to set up, you know, areas of quarantine?
Yes.
There is a jail.
How many people could?
Spring City has a jail.
I know they do. My son's been
I'm
in
a
it.
jailer during that little day.
On their activities days, they brought him to the jail, and the kids thought this was the coolest thing in, you know, to be in jail. You know, after about 20 minutes, after people walk away from him, it's not going to be so neat.
One thing we haven't thought about, and that is, that's all national forest. And you're allowed as a citizen to go anywhere in that national forest and camp for 2 weeks.
Right.
So,
And then move
we have
100
no
yards
control.
and
Right.
camp for 2 more
But
weeks.
they did not require that moving during COVID. It
Okay.
was open season.
Okay.
there you go.
And so here's the question. So you've got a group, and let's just call it a tribe, of people who are in an area that they have a legal right to not be kicked out of. How do we work with them? And my answer would be, you know, if you go to 3rd Nephi chapter 7, it talked about the tribes, people divided into tribes, and how did they do that? Anyone remember?
Each tribe had their own laws, but they had intertribal laws so there wouldn't be one tribe, you know, I guess certain general rules that all the tribes agreed on, that you don't do this to another tribe.
Exactly, and so they had laws within their tribe or their community that they adhered to, and the other communities would respect those laws, but there were intertribal laws and regulations. And so my feeling is that's probably how you would deal with that, right? And again, the idea is we become good neighbors, right? You know, and we set up, quote, you know, a trading post, and we set up, you know, things where, oh gosh, we've got so many ramen noodles, you know, you guys got any mac and cheese, you know, and we could.
People need to learn to barter at that point.
Right? Right? Is negotiating a skill, 100%, right?
No.
And so we work in that vein. Working with those who are apprehensive about being under city or church leadership. How best to work with those who don't want to associate. And I think what Scott said maybe is this is the territory here. If you're going to be within this territory, you know, these are the rules or the association. If someone says, you know, I don't want you guys to know who I am, it's like, well, you've just disqualified
choice.
yourself.
Move on.
Dispersing refugees to your property. Here's a question: is if you've opened up your property, and I would caution, you know, all of us, don't invite people to live in your home if you can at all help it, that are not family, that are not, because that could be tricky, the camel in the tent situation. What supplies do you need from the city or the community? I think most of us agree we do not want to write out, here's all my resources and my supplies, and you know, and hand it to anybody. You know, if I've got, you know more ramen noodles than you, I don't want you coming and stealing my noodles. And so I did a seminar years ago, and it was this energy worker type person. And she was trying to convince us that we could say this certain prayer over ramen noodles, and they would be super, super healthy for you. And I didn't buy it. And so, I think,
Well, the pot doesn't run out.
yeah, the pot would never run out. You're right. Okay, let's move on to another scenario, and ongoing scenario. We're on page 4. It has now been 1 month since you accepted, people onto your property. You have done well in collecting supplies in the community that you were short on. Stores are now slowly back up with supplies. Now you are learning that you will be accommodating them for a longer period. Some of the people living with you are not going back north and want to stay in Sanpete County. They're unable to find work, the goal being to help them be self-reliant. Thoughts and suggestions, what do you do?
You just have to be really prayerful and kind. Not everybody's an enemy, and there's a lot of sacrifice
Yeah.
at a time like this. And you just really have to dig deep to be a kind person. What if I was in their shoes?
Right.
So it just is gonna take a lot.
And I think you're right, Claudia. I think that generally we are a very, very kind and open and giving people, maybe to a fault. And so some of what we're going through here is kind of hard-nosed, but I think the kinder you are, the more hard-nosed maybe the boundaries need to be. How many of you have read an old book, The Christmas Box? Remember that one? The guy who wrote it, Richard Paul Evans, his sister is my office manager, and she was telling me the other day as she's proofreading my stuff, and she says, "Have you heard of the Christmas Box House?" And I thought, I haven't. And so she explained it, and what it is, it's a house that they can bring children to who have been displaced. They're with Child Protective Services, and the house is made up like Christmas. There's always a Christmas tree. There's presents under the tree that a kid could choose. And the point being is, people who are in traumatic situations, who are in crisis, don't want to be matriculated through a cold, sterile environment. They've had enough trauma already. And so part of setting up guidelines and rules, I believe, is going to be say, okay, here's the rules, now how do we make it soft and comfortable? If somebody comes in and they're a refugee, and you look up from your desk and you think, versus, oh, I'm so glad you made it. Are you okay? One of the things that was pointed out to me is you got to serve coffee. And again, you may or may not be surprised at how many good LDS people are coffee drinkers, and that is a comfort.
Decaf.
And so the point is when people are distressed and they're on edge and they're wary and they're fearful, you'll get a lot more mileage if you're accommodating, if you're warm, if you're friendly, and that's what we want to be. So the next thing, finances. That might be a tricky one. You've got a family that's staying with you, and things are opening back up, and you're just tight with the budget and matching every penny, and they're not really willing to contribute, but they're going to take their family out for ice cream, and you're thinking, okay, what about us? How do you work the finances? If somebody's got a thick stack of goldbacks, that's one thing. If they got the shirt on their back and it's torn, that's another thing. Issues to consider. when bringing others into your tribe. Smoking. Is that gonna be a deal breaker for you? If somebody smokes? What about marijuana use? Okay, medicinal or recreational? Here's my experience with patients in California when the medical marijuana was passed years and years and years ago. 95% of my patients who had medical marijuana cards were potheads. Oh, I need to smoke the weed with my friends because I get stressed out. And so there's just because someone has a medical marijuana card doesn't mean that they've got cancer or an autoimmune disease that they're being managed with that. Is that a deal breaker for you, or is it not? Mental illness. This is a big one. We've got children with BPD, borderline personality disorder. It used to be called bipolar. It used to be called, what was the other name? We've gone through all of those names with manic depressive, yeah. And so are they using psych meds? Do they have their psych meds? Have any of you seen this video? It's Bob Hope. It's a Bob Hope short. It's probably from the 50s or 60s. Did you see that? Hilarious. And so he's talking to someone, and they meet him, and he's talking about the zombies in did you see this? The zombies in New York, and he's describing them, and Bob Hope says, "Oh, you mean Democrats?" Which was hilarious since it was so old, anyways. Pets, dogs, cats, reptiles. I've got my pet boa constrictor, and he's friendly. He won't squeeze your 3-year-old to death. How do you deal with those situations? Hygiene and sanitation. There are different levels of hygiene and sanitation, right? Some people are very, very comfortable living in what others would consider squalor. And whereas if somebody is a super neatnik, that could drive you crazy too. Registered sex offenders, we talked a little bit about that. So what do you do? A registered sex offender. What was the offense? I had premarital sex with my 17-year-old girlfriend, and I was 18, and they made a big deal out of it, and so now I'm registered. Is different than the pedophile, right? Who according to Jesus needs millstone therapy. You know what millstone therapy is? You tie a millstone around their neck, throw them into the depth of the sea. Anyways, felons, illegal aliens. Do you ask citizenship status? Is that an issue? Helpless victim mentality. You think you might see some of that?
For sure you'll see.
Christian, LDS, non-Christian? Does that make a difference for you? If someone comes in and they're a good practicing Buddhist versus a Jack Mormon versus spiritually whatever, right?
Atheist.
What about non-English speaking?
You'll speak a lot with your hands.
Right? You may want to match up somebody who, let's say they're Spanish speaking with somebody who's able to speak Spanish, right? That would make some sense.
That'd be a great opportunity to learn a new language.
Right?
It doesn't portend well for those of us who know Pig Latin though.
What about someone with lots of tattoos or multiple piercings? Do you judge someone based on that, right? Some would say, no, I'm fine with that. That's okay. Others saying, oh no, that's a big red flag for us, right? And so, again, just, you know, somebody who's very, very withdrawn. You know, strong personalities versus somebody who's really wimpy. You know, who would you rather have, living, 30 feet outside your front door?
So what happens after the prisons and jails, they run out of diesel for their generators and their food storage is out and they open up the cells and the gates?
Episode number 2 of the series. No, that was, I read the book. Any of you read the book that Homestead movie was based on?
No.
I just finished it a week or so ago. It's called Black Autumn.
Black, awesome.
The author?
Here's an interesting thing. So Jeff Kirkham and Jason Ross, and those are the names of the 2 main characters in the book. They changed it to, Ian Ross, I think, in the movie. And so I thought interesting that the 2 authors casted themselves as the main characters in the novel. But again, the book talks about the prison situation, that Tom just mentioned. And can I give you a spoiler alert for the book? Because most of you probably won't read the book. The guards, as they were running out of fuel to do things, they knew, there was going to be a problem, and they decided that the serious offenders could starve and rot to death in their cells, and the ones who were not, quote, the worst of the worst, they opened the doors and they let them go, which created significant problems, right? And so, and it's not like we've got, a prison that's close by, do we?
South of Richmond.
Yeah, and if prison doors are open, you think they're gonna go south or north?
North.
Depends.
Oh, yeah.
Depends.
Depends on where they may have connections or
The
ties.
weather.
And mind you, not all people who are in prison are necessarily bad guys. There's some, people who have reformed and good people who did bad things. But
They're still gonna be homeless and hungry.
and
They're creative.
and know how to work not only the system they're in, but us as well. So again, security force is going to be important.
I have a question.
Mhm.
So, you talked to Tim Clark, and you talked to
Johansson,
who?
Bishop Johansson,
Yeah,
Jay
so
Johansson.
what did they say? Are they prepared?
That's
They
right.
were,
Yeah.
they were
If
in
he
the
called you
middle,
a prepper, that's the
they were in
sign.
the middle of making callings and he preparedness and things like that. And so this is a discussion we're gonna have ongoing along with this and along with CERT training, along with preparedness on every aspect of it. That's how we as a community is gonna become prepared. And he acknowledged the fact that where's everyone gonna come? They're gonna come to me, the bishop, Tim. Clark, for example.
And I told Bishop
He's
Johansson
aware of
that
it.
that's where they
So
were coming.
so it's best for everybody to get prepared for it.
Yeah, and so our bishop basically said, you know what, I'm going to bring this up in ward council.
Oh, okay.
And he absolutely acknowledged that, yeah, this is something, that needs to be addressed. And again, in the same vein as your CERT training or your military training or your fire, training, you think things through. And so, for us to be having a discussion like this tonight is, I don't think it's certainly not out of line. And it's not like, we're gonna, do things that are, I think unrealistic. It's not like we're gonna all chip in so that we can get, 2 miles of razor wire. And, but anyways, questions or comments?
So I joined the church in 1980 as a freshman in college in Oregon, and the people that I took the discussions at their house, you know, they had a basement full of, they had 3 years food, they had wood, you know, they had fuel, they had everything, and several people in that ward, you know, were prepared. So that was 1980, and it seems like it's
What's there, Andrew?
it's just become out of fashion to be prepared. Fast forward here, we're in Spring City, and one of our previous Relief Society presidents disclosed to me that she wasn't asking for a inventory of the sisters' food storage. She was just saying, where are you, you know, on your food storage? You need to think about it and stuff. And she got emails from former bishops in our Spring City Second Ward that said, well, one former bishop and another man that held a high calling, you are fear-mongering the people in our ward. And so I've kind of been of the thought that, you know, if you are prepared, you shall not fear. And so gently being an evangelist for that, if you are prepared, you shall not fear. Because you know, if when people have said to my husband, well, you know, and everybody in this room's had this, when things break down, we're just coming to your house. And my husband says, you better have a better plan than that for your family.
That's why we don't let other people that we think would do that know what we've got, or why we don't fill out surveys truthfully. Well, when someone asks you, oh, how you doing? Well, I guess we're okay.
We could
You know,
squeak by. Yeah,
So being
Is
an
it-
evangelist for being prepared,
yeah.
you know what I mean? It's, if you are prepared, you shall not fear.
Right.
And that doesn't matter, that, you know, that could be, that runs the whole gamut of the, you know, the yellow thing. That runs the gamut of our physical bodies, our marital relationships, you know? We need to be prepared to have things strong and healthy.
I've always thought it was really interesting that we're all reading the same scriptures, we're all listening to the same, you know, prophets and talks and things, and some of us think, oh my goodness, did you hear what he said there? We've got to do this and we've got to do that, and the Spirit guides us and tells us to, you know, you need to do this or you need to do that, and others of them who seem to be way more spiritual than me, don't get it at all. And it's like, and I like the word you use, it's out of fashion, you know? And so the question is this just a fashion statement that we're making here? You know, because we've got some, you know, some ramen noodles in our basement to see
Only
us
if you
through.
post it on social media.
Corey and then Marcus.
I've got a question for the group. How many of you believe that this is the influx of people could really happen?
Well, that's a question that I was thinking. You came up with this displaced adult citizens over the last 4 years, which is obviously, you know, a valid metric. A metric that I was thinking about is, you know, we're new to the community, and one of the things that we love about being here, in addition to stuff like this, where you have like-minded people around, is the fact that we're not in a major metropolitan area. So if something was to happen, we should be fairly insulated, at least distance-wise, from this type of thing, and hopefully in a community where we have people who have a mentality of self-preservation and self-sustainment. My question or my thought is there a statistic that we could find to sort of answer your question about the likelihood of this? Is how far will people go? And if you receive people that start to go to great lengths to reach you, what type of people are you likely to deal with, right? Because, and this isn't rocket surgery, because there's plenty of data out there about countries that have had natural disasters or, you know, cataclysmic political fallout and, you know, have been living hand to mouth or worse. And the mentality of the people that you're receiving is really a major factor. So I'm curious if we could assess what's the likelihood of this in
In other
where-
words, if
where
people
we
are
are.
actually are gonna be okay and.
Are they gonna reach us?
Legit.
Yeah, I mean, sure, we all gonna have family members and friends and stuff like that, but what's the likelihood of?
So, I've been asking people around, about, it's about this exact scenario. And I hear feedback coming that they've received inspiration or guidance that people are coming. You saw how many hands that were here that rose. And to the point where they're collecting things or making things for an influx of people. And so I think that they're receiving that guidance from a higher power that people will be coming and that we need to be prepared, because if we're not, it's gonna be chaotic. But I don't know how many or when or anything
Right.
like that, but just the feedback that I've been getting.
Or what the traveling situation
Right.
would be like Marcus and then Rick.
I think that a lot of the people that are in the church, they're not understanding the scriptures. And they're thinking, well, the church has everything we need, they're gonna help take care of us. And that's why they just say, okay, well, I'm gonna, all's well in Zion and we're all good. And I think that's the mentality that we're fighting. And then they look at us like, you guys are out of your minds, And it's gonna come to a reckoning, and it's coming soon.
How many of you have actually heard in seriousness that God will provide manna for us? We don't need all the food stores, he did it to the children of Israel in the desert, we'll be fed. It's like, yeah,
Well,
don't bet on that one.
Those of us that prepared may have it.
Yeah.
The ones that aren't prepared are gonna eat our food.
Rick?
What are they gonna try?
So I've read some government stuff, and I wanna say it was FEMA, but don't hold me to that. And one of the things is, as far as the likelihood, they say, 3 days walking distance is what most
Okay.
refugees will make. So if you're in good health, you might make 20 miles a day, highly unlikely.
Especially if there's rough conditions. So I work
Winter time,
in
I walk
Payson.
20 miles.
So I'm 55 miles from my house. And so is it likely that people from Salt Lake are gonna make it here? Probably not. Who knows? One of the things that I noticed in a lot of these quote survival books is you've got a guy who's stranded and he's gotta make it home and it's 700 miles and he's walking.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, what an idiot. There's bicycles everywhere. Get on a bike. You could do 700 miles in if you're in shape in a week, easy.
I've read, this is a long time ago, but a study of what people in like the really big cities would do, like Chicago, Detroit, New York, that most people, they don't know anything except being right there, and they're just, the majority of them would just stay there until they die because they just don't know anything else.
Right.
I can tell you what some of the older prophets have said, like Orson Pratt, some of those. They said that there'll come a time when a lot of the saints will be called back to Utah, and they'll have to be taken care of, but they'll be good people. But on the other hand, they talk about those that don't want to fight in the wars that are going to come, and it won't be a civil war like it was last time. It'll be in Texas and Florida and Montana, and state against state is what the prophet Joseph Smith told us. But so I think there will be more come than what we're thinking, is my personal opinion, just from what I've read from what those guys have said. But I think they'll trickle in a little bit, but I'm thinking that most of them will come because they can get protection here.
And what does the scripture say? That those that are not willing to take up the sword will need to flee to Zion. And
Yeah, but this isn't
So I think they'll come, I don't know how many, I'm figuring from Arizona to Idaho, you could have 10 or 12 million come. That may not sound like a lot, but imagine putting 65 people in your house. There would be standing room only, you can't do it, you can't. But there'll have to be, I envision tent cities is what I envision.
Well, and if you've read some of the prophecies about Sanpete County, you know, it's tents, you know, as far as you can see. Which is interesting, you know, because I don't know if anyone's noticed, but water is kind of a situation, you know, in Sanpete or in Utah in general. And so, I guess my message is take the information that we've shared, and if you haven't spent a little bit of time, you know, filling out your thing here, do so, and put some names with some numbers as far as and then ask God, what do you want me to do? And you know, and then you know, go from there. Jane.
I think it was in Missouri, can't remember exactly where. The whole state president, the whole state had a really amazing preparation type day with scenarios and things like that. A couple weeks later, a huge tornado, you know, just blasted through the whole area.
Yeah.
And those people were prepared and knew what to do, and it was amazing.
Yeah.
This discussion reminds me of Hurricane Katrina. When that hit, obviously New Orleans, but the people were displaced to several states. So I was living in Dallas, and all the hotels, like the sports stadiums, stuff like that, the schools, and that sort of sounds like scenarios that you talk about here. So imagine if something maybe happened in Salt Lake City, maybe, but not the rest of the country, or not larger than that, and then the people would just be displaced, and then it was manageable. But it wasn't like the chaotic things like in some books you might talk about. Like if the power grid went down for the whole country, then everything that you talk about here is pretty much overwhelmed.
I just heard today, someone was sharing with me that they've got family in Southern California, and they said all the Airbnbs, all the hotels, any place where anybody could stay, the cost has tripled. And so again, in a situation where there's disaster, there will be those who will take advantage, and you know, I might charge you $12 for that package of ramen noodles. So
we're seeing that now with eggs.
Right? Yeah.
There is a series called Jericho. If you've never seen it, I would encourage you to watch it. I'm hoping that it won't be as bad as it was in the movie here in Utah. I think it will be better here because there's a lot of people that are like-minded and like to work together. So, but anyway, it's well worth watching if you've got the time.
It is. It's a very engaging series.
It is.
That's been what, maybe 20 years ago?
Oh my gosh,
It's been a while.
You'll probably have to just buy the set to watch it.
Yeah, it's probably not on Netflix. Okay, thanks everybody.
Thank you.